This is North Country Journal with Frank Fischer.
If you've had a chance to get out and try Korean food, you may have heard of BUDAEJJIGAE, which is usually translated as Army Base Stew. It goes back to when the U.S. Army served here during and after the Korean War. BUDAEJJIGAE is a steaming, bubbling, orange-colored stew that's awash with, wait till you hear all this, sausage, hot dogs, ham, Spam, ground beef, a slice of American cheese, tofu, bean sprouts, kimchi, Korean hot peppers, garlic, onions, scallions, usually noodles, and a few other things too. A culinary convergence of two cultures. It came about amid the hand-to-mouth hard times of the Korean War and the tough years that followed. Koreans with jobs on American bases would get hold of Army leftovers, then cook them up off-base with whatever Korean ingredients came to hand. Thus was born BUDAEJJIGAE. I'm told it's high in sodium, so do keep that in mind. Many say BUDAEJJIGAE started in Uijeongbu City, right here in Area 1. Whatever the case, the city boasts a street lined with BUDAEJJIGAE restaurants. Its sign states proudly, Uijeongbu BUDAEJJIGAE Street. A waitress brings a pan of ingredients to your table, sets it on a gas burner, pours in a broth, and within minutes, the BUDAEJJIGAE is bubbling. BUDAEJJIGAE, or Army Base Stew. It's a lasting legacy of the wartime contact between America's GIs and the people of Korea, a cross-cultural consequence of the Korean War.
And that was the North Country Journal with Frank Fischer, writer-editor with the USAG Red Cloud and Area 1 Public Affairs Office.
This is the North Country Journal Hour, the radio show that gives you insight into daily life in Korea and Korea's rich history and culture. It also highlights the U.S. Army's history here in Korea, along with other topics of interest to Area 1 soldiers, airmen, civilians, and family members. I'm Staff Sgt Sgt Crawford, and on each edition of the North Country Journal Hour, we hear from Mr. Frank Fischer, creator of the North Country Journal radio commentaries and editor of the North Country Journal Hour. The hour brings you a deeper look into the topics of those 2-minute commentaries that air here on AFN KC the Eagle. Now here's the 2-minute commentary that today's broadcast will expand on, and for fuller story, here's Mr. Frank Fischer.
Thank you, Sergeant Crawford. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the North Country Journal Hour. As you heard a moment ago in our 2-minute commentary, our topic is BUDAEJJIGAE, or Army Camp Stew. And whether you've eaten BUDAEJJJIGAE or not, the story of how it came about and of what the experience is like when you order it in a restaurant is something I think you're going to find pretty interesting. It's something that, in a sense, has a connection to you who are serving here in Area 1. Because, first, BUDAEJJIGAE came about through the encounter between the people of Korea and the American soldiers and other service members who served here 6 decades or so before you. And second, because a lot of people maintain that the birthplace of BUDAEJJIGAE was right here in Area 1. Based on what I've seen here in Korea, it's fair to say that when it comes to Korean food, BUDAEJJIGAE is definitely one of those Korean dishes that's pretty popular among our American military people. And maybe you're relatively new to Korea and you're hearing of BUDAEJJIGAE for the first time right now. Or maybe you've had it and you can't wait to order it again. Or maybe you tried it and you felt, nah, this isn't really my thing. Whatever the case, how it came about makes for an interesting story all by itself. When we're back after the break, we'll take a look at how devastated Korea was after the war and how BUDAEJJIGAE was a result of those hard-pressed conditions. We'll also tell you what it's like to go and eat in a BUDAEJJIGAE restaurant, and I'll also have a few thoughts on how to make the most of your time here in Korea by getting out and exploring the country. But first, here's Sergeant Crawford with the break.
And it's Taylor Swift with Wildest Dreams right here on AFN KC the Eagle, serving America's best. We're back with the North Country Journal Hour, and here's Frank Fischer.
Thank you, Sergeant Crawford. We're talking about BUDAEJJIGAE, or Army Camp Stew. And now it's time for a closer look at how it came about. To do that, I want to first give you a picture of what Korea was like during and right after the Korean War. The war was fought from 1950 to 1953. Just about anywhere you may be in Korea, whatever direction you're looking in, you can be sure that 6 decades ago, some kind of combat action may well have taken place there, or not far from there, wherever you're looking, because the war was just everywhere. Those hills you see on the horizon, imagine artillery rounds bursting on the slopes, throwing up dirt and smoke, and then hearing the deep boom of the explosions carrying across the distance. Some of those streets you've walked down here in Korea, quite possibly, if there had once been houses on them when the war was raging, they'd have been smashed to splinters by artillery or tank fire. In short, Korea during the war was left blasted, burning, and broken from one end of the peninsula to the other. People fled their homes to escape the fighting. You can see in those wartime photos the long, weary columns of homeless refugees trudging their way across snow-covered countryside, trying to get to some part of the country that might be safer than where they'd been. Those photos of the war's suffering refugees are a well-known and enduring image of the Korean War. Another well-known thing about the suffering the Korean people endured during and after the war was the tens of thousands of children whose parents were killed during the fighting, or who died from disease, hunger, or cold. According to South Korean government records, the war made orphans of 100,000 children, and more than 250,000 women were made widows. So that's the picture. Homes and villages left behind, homes burned or blown apart, families homeless, a huge number of widows, tens of thousands of orphans, and with all of that, of course, there were endless physical hardships of the kind common to a war zone. People living outdoors or in rubble or in caves, no heat, no hot water, not having enough clothes, not having the clothes needed to withstand the frigid winters, no jobs, no money, and very, very hard up for food. And in those conditions, homelessness, bitter winter cold, lack of food, just think of what it did to sanitation generally and to people's immune systems. Disease was rampant. Typhoid fever, dysentery, salmonella, these were just a few of the diseases that added to the suffering of the Korean people. Well, another very common thing during the war were the military camps that were set up all over Korea and that remained after the war. For the Korean people enduring these desperate hardships during the war and in the years after the war, these camps were a place where, if you were very, very lucky, you might get a job. Although the war was over, the hardship was far from over. Those who worked on the bases noticed that, hey, if you go behind the officers' club or the chow hall, the Americans throw out their leftover food. People thought, we can put this to good use. So the food made its way off the installations and ended up being combined with Korean food items. The GI stuff that you heard about, hot dogs, Spam, ground beef, American cheese, got mixed in with traditional Korean ingredients, giving you Army Camp Stew, BUDAEJJIGAE. It caught on, it stuck, and today, 6 decades after the war, you can find BUDAEJJIGAE restaurants anywhere in Korea. You'll certainly find them near a lot of college campuses, and there's even a BUDAEJJIGAE chain with restaurants nationwide. Now, many say that BUDAEJJIGAE originated right here in Area 1 in the city of Uijeongbu. In fact, the city boldly lays claim to being the place where BUDAEJJIGAE got started. The city has an entire street, as you heard, of BUDAEJJIGAE restaurants. And as if to leave no room for doubt in anybody's mind, the street even has a prominent sign that reads in both Korean and English, Uijeongbu BUDAEJJIGAE Street. We've been there, and we'll tell you about that coming up after the break. Here's Sgt Crawford.
And I'll be right back with your weather, exchange rate, and gas prices. We're back with the North Country Journal Hour, and here's Frank Fischer.
Thank you, Sgt Crawford. Well, if you're just joining us, we're talking today about Army Camp Stew, or BUDAEJJIGAE as it's called in Korean. Now let's look at what it's like at a BUDAEJJIGAE restaurant. I'll describe this based on what I've seen at BUDAEJJIGAE restaurants, especially some of those on the BUDAEJJIGAE Street in Uijeongbu here in Area 1. Well, first, when you go in, you'll notice there are already gas stoves set up on the tables. It's part of the setup. In one part of the restaurant, the kitchen staff is at work getting the ingredients ready to go straight to the customer's table without delay. So what they're doing is they're slicing the ingredients into the proper sizes, and they put them in a shallow black pan. Each pan has its ingredients. When they've got the ingredients on the pan, they then stack it slantwise, one behind the other, in a metal cabinet. It serves as a kind of storage rack or shelf. In military terms, you could say that it's a kind of staging area for BUDAEJJIGAE. When the waitress has taken your order, she goes back to the kitchen, gets one of those pans, brings it out to you, puts it down on the small gas stove. That's when you can see at a glance why BUDAEJJJIGAE is a culinary convergence of two cultures, American and Korean, because in the pan are the ingredients I mentioned earlier. Ham, Spam, hot dogs, sausage, ground beef, a slice of cheese, tofu, bean sprouts, kimchi, Korean hot peppers, garlic, onions, scallions, certain other ingredients too, and typically noodles. Next, the waitress pours a broth over all of that in the pan. Then she starts the gas burner, turns the little dial, and the ingredients start to cook. Normally, people eat BUDAEJJJIGAE with ramyeon noodles added to the mix, and usually those noodles get added a minute or two after the cooking has actually started. If you want those noodles, then once the waitress knows that, she takes them out of the cellophane package, and what you'll see come out of that is a slab of dry, squiggly noodles in the form of a block. It's a brittle block. And she puts that slab into the mix that's already started cooking up, and after 5 or 10 minutes, everything is turned orange, mainly because of the red pepper paste that's one of the ingredients, and it's steaming, it's bubbling, and it's ready to eat. Now keep in mind that not all Korean restaurants have the usual tables and chairs. Throughout the country, it's still very much the normal thing to find that this or that restaurant is set up along the old traditional arrangement where the customers sit on the floor and eat from a low table. On BUDAEJJJIGAE Street in Uijeongbu and any of the chain restaurants and a lot of other BUDAEJJJIGAE restaurants, they have both styles of seating. By the way, if you don't know, and you may be new to Korea, you may be one of the rotational units that's here for 9 months at a time, if for whatever reason you haven't gotten around to learning how to use chopsticks and you think you want to, don't be daunted by that. Ask someone to show you who knows, and believe me, if you want to get the hang of it, you'll pick it up. It's much easier than it may look once you know how to position your fingers and once you practice a little bit. Keep in mind, by the way, that BUDAEJJJIGAE is said to be high in sodium, as I mentioned earlier, and also, of course, those hot dogs and some of the other ingredients are processed meat, and from a health standpoint, sodium and processed meats are things you don't want to eat too often if you eat them at all. But don't let that scare you. You can try BUDAEJJJIGAE once and see if you like it. Well, I'll be back in just a moment, but first, here's Sgt Crawford with the break.
And here's your KC update. Right here on AFN KC the Eagle, and we're back with the North Country Journal Hour, and here's Frank Fisher.
Thank you again, Sgt Crawford. We're talking today about BUDAEJJJIGAE, or Army Camp Stew. Well, as you may have already discovered here in Korea, BUDAEJJJIGAE is far from the only Korean dish worth trying out. There are all sorts of great things in the way of Korean food. Among the most popular with our service members are things like bulgogi and Korean barbecue. You may know that that's very popular here among the troops. Both are great. I certainly like them, but there's a lot more besides. Korean food offers wide variety, and on the whole, it's good for your health. Fresh vegetables are a big part of the Korean diet. Fresh fruit served as dessert is also common. And compared to, say, American or other Western food, Korean food tends, for the most part, to be way lower in calories and fat. Now, let me offer you a few closing thoughts on how you can make the most of your time here in Korea, and why you're doing yourself a big favor if you do make the most of that chance. For one thing, the chance to see another country and experience another culture firsthand is a broadening thing. As you know, the real world isn't just your hometown or mine. It isn't just your home state or my home state. And it is not just our country, the USA. This planet that spins on its axis is made up of many nations and cultures and languages and, of course, geographical regions. You, because of your service with the U.S. military, happen to be in the region of Northeast Asia. And in a country, the Republic of Korea, that has a long and rich history, and I might add, an amazing history. Just think what the Korean people have accomplished in the decades after the Korean War. With their grit and determination and willingness to work hard and pull together for the sake of their country, and with the huge emphasis they put on being well educated, they pulled themselves up out of the rubble and severe hardship of the Korean War, and they kept at it until, now, the Republic of Korea is the world's 13th largest economy. You're stationed here in Area 1, a place known for its fresh air and its great hiking. But Area 1 is also an easy subway ride to the nation's vibrant capital city of Seoul. Seoul, as you may know, is a handsome, modern, high-rise metropolis. It's got great coffee shops, museums, shopping, restaurants. Fact is, wherever in Korea you go, you can't go wrong. And by getting out and seeing Korea, by looking to read up on its history, learning some of its language, by getting to know Korean people and to experience Korea's culture, you're enriching your own understanding of the broader world. Whether you know it or not, you're building insight into that broader world. You're building life experience, and those insights and experiences will last you a lifetime. If you have kids, or if you will have them in the future, your kids will be that much better off because you, their mom or dad, served with the military and served overseas. You'll be able to pass on to them your insights and experiences in ways that will make them well-rounded people. I might add that your overseas experience and your military experience in general will also help you better exercise your responsibilities as a citizen. Because, when it's time to talk about what might be best for your town or your city back home, you'll be one of those citizens who has that extra perspective. You know not only how things are done back home, but how they've been done in other places you've been. So, whether you decide to go and order that steaming, bubbling stew known as BUDAEJJIGAE or not, make the most of your chance to get out and try Korean food and see Korea's culture and way of life. You may never again get the chance to do it, but you've got that chance now, and what you see and learn here will be a part of you for the rest of your life. Well, thank you for joining us for this edition of the North Country Journal Hour. The North Country Journal Hour airs every other Thursday at 3 p.m. We'll be back with you again in January after the holidays here on AFN KCD Eagle. I'm Frank Fischer of the Area 1 Public Affairs Office, and I'm editor of the North Country Journal Hour. Handing back now to my North Country Journal Hour broadcast partner, AFN KCDJ, Army Staff Sergeant Sgt Crawford. I wish you a safe and happy holiday. Here's Sergeant Crawford.
And as Mr. Fisher said, thanks for joining us for this edition of the North Country Journal Hour, and I'll be right back with your weather, exchange rate, and gas prices.